Hi, and welcome to the Newbery Chronicles. This is a podcast where two people read through every Newbery Medal winning book and then we talk about them. I am Michael.
And I'm Rebecca.
And this time we're talking about the book that won the 1991 Newbery Medal, which is Maniac Magee by Jerry Spinelli. But first, we're going to talk about the books that we read. And I just want to say before we begin, Rebecca read 14 books in the interim between our last podcast and this one.
Let me clarify.
We should all give Rebecca a round of applause for her dedication to the craft of literary art.
I finished that many. Some of them I had, started when we were doing the podcast last time.
That doesn't matter.
Well,
you still read a lot of books.
I'm not going to talk about all of those, though, because that would take up a long time, and some of these I don't particularly want to talk about. So
you don't want to talk about The Tale of Despero, which we covered in our podcast already?
There's a reason why. I read that with my son, which was very delightful to read with him, and he really enjoyed it. But yes, you all have heard me talk about that one already. One that I do want to talk about, and I have been talking about this.
I've heard a lot about this one.
And it's The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This book has been very popular this year, and it's one of those that had really been hyped up a lot to me, and I'm always a little bit nervous with those because it could go one of two ways. One is that you love it and you understand why everybody's talking about it, or you don't understand why everybody's talking about it, and you just get really discouraged that everyone was talking so much about this book that was mediocre. But let me tell you, The Correspondent, in my very unhumble opinion, very much lived up to the hype. I devoured this book. I listened to it. I hope it has won or will win an award for what is it called, an Audie? Is that what they're...
Are you talking about audiobooks?
The awards, there's awards for audiobooks. Anyway, it needs...
Jane Fonda is going to be in the film.
I don't want to talk about the film because I'm not excited about it. But what I am excited about is how wonderful the audiobook was. This book is an epistolary novel, so the entire story that you receive is told through letters that the main character is writing and receiving. It very much centers around the loss of her child and navigating that, while also being an aging woman losing her eyesight. And it is simply magnificent. I loved it very, very, very much. And before I even finished it, I ordered it for my mother-in-law and Michael's Nana. And I am just grateful to be able to share the story with her. So this is I would not say this is not necessarily a very plot-heavy book, but it's also not a boring book at all. It's very accessible. You can read it very quickly. In fact, as soon as I finished listening to it, Michael and I were at a bookstore. I bought the physical copy, and I reread it because it was that wonderful. And it was still moving that close a time of listening to it the first time. So I just think it's expertly done. It's very accessible. It's funny. It's moving. It confirms some of your worst fears as a parent, but also comforts you in the process. I don't really know how to describe it, but everyone that thinks they would like this book should read this book. I also listened to an audiobook by Jeff Center. It's called In the Wild Light. This is I also should have said the 5 books that I chose are in different genres, if that is important to people. In the Wild Light.
That many books that she could choose from genres.
These are just the ones I wanted to talk about that are different enough to be interesting. In the Wild Light is a YA novel that is about these two best friends, a boy and a girl, who are growing up in East Tennessee. And they're from a very small town, and both of them have been impacted very personally by the opioid crisis. The boy's mother has died of an overdose, and the girl's mother is in active addiction. Both of them are incredibly smart. The girl has discovered this, like, I guess she's discovered this mold in these caves that helps scientists make this medicine that everybody needs.
Is it penicillin?
And no, because this is like modern. It's like a new strain of that or something. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, basically. And she's accepted into this really fancy school, and I want to say Connecticut. To bring everything in this podcast back to Connecticut, it could be somewhere else, and I'm just forgetting. But she says, I'll only come if you let my friend come with me. And it's just about their journey, like being very loyal to their hometown while it has its complications, and then adjusting to this new school. I just found it to be really sweet. I do love a good YA novel, and this one had some of the tropes that drive Michael insane, but not all of them. And I also appreciated that I think this guy is from Tennessee, but if he's not, he definitely did his research, unlike other YA authors that we will throw under the bus. John Green, who does not know how to read a map or like actually go to Tennessee before he tries to write about it.
And he only lives in Indiana too.
I like John Green. I just got mad at him in one book where he didn't know what he was talking about. This book was very good. I really enjoyed it. I listened to the long-awaited because I've been on the wait list for a long time, the memoir by Jeff Hiller called Actress of a Certain Age. Michael introduced me to this beautiful show called Somebody Somewhere, and it is probably my favorite show of all time now. It might have beat Friday Night Lights. I don't know if I'm ready to commit to that yet.
That's bold.
But it was a very wonderful show. And Jeff Hiller is one of the main characters in that show, and this was his memoir. I don't know why you would read this if you had not watched the show, but it's really talking about his journey of like trying to get into acting. He talks very much about his medical condition that affects like his hair loss, and also gives him like he has skin irritation often, which is also featured in the show. Like his character also has those same things. So it's very personal about his life, but it is very much centered around the success that he gained from being on this show. But it was just very, very lovely. And then if you listen to our last podcast episode, you know that we did Sarah Plain Tall, and we both gave it rave reviews. I went back and reread Skylark, which is the sequel, and just found it to be very delightful. Like, I think that Sarah Plain Tall is better, but Patricia McLaughlin she's just incredible. I also checked out the other books in the series, but I haven't got around to them yet. And then the last book I want to talk about is Dear Writer by Maggie Smith.
Maggie Smith,
no, not
of Downton
her.
Abbey fame.
Not her. What? Michael knows this.
There's more than one Maggie Smith in this
Michael
world.
knows this. Maggie Smith is a poet. You might know her very popular poem, Good Bones, which has blown up several times, and each time it reemerges, like she is back in the spotlight. But Maggie Smith is really fantastic. She's not only a great poet, but she is a great writer in general. Like, she wrote a memoir that I read a couple years ago called You Could Make This Place Beautiful. That's really reflecting on her divorce and life after divorce. Dear Writer is not a memoir, and while it does feature a lot of her poetry, this book is really just helping anybody who's interested in writing to like hone their craft, but also understand their strengths and their talents. We read this together as a staff because, well, one of my coworkers was really moved by it and just found a lot of similarities between how she talks about writing and telling your story with how we pastor people. And so at the end of each chapter, there's a prompt that you can write something of your own that reflects on things that she taught you in that chapter. And we did that together as a staff, and it was a really meaningful time. So I think this book is really good, even if you don't consider yourselves a writer. I think it's wonderful to read and to just think about the way that you tell your story, the way that you listen to stories, the way that you read stories and poetry. I found it to be really impactful. So, over to you.
Over to me. I read 3 books. 2 of them were in the same genre. So,
Excellent.
unlike Rebecca, I was
don't
not
wanna bore
dedicated to the
people.
craft of letters.
I don't want to bore people.
At any rate, the first book that I read was called Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. It is a work of high fantasy. Brandon Sanderson's pretty famous for a lot of things, like Mistborn and like the Stormlight Archives, I think is the thing it's called. That's like a huge fantasy series. At any rate, I had never read any Brandon Sanderson before, and one of my students is a big Brandon Sanderson fan, and she loaned me this copy of this book, and I said, I am not interested in reading 7,000 pages of a book series that has like 8 entries in it. And she told me, don't worry, this one is standalone. And lo and behold, it is. Although I believe it does loop into some of his other books in some way or another. At any rate, Elantris is about this kingdom that used to have this big, illustrious, like, capital city that, like a decade or 2 ago, fell into ruin. And in a ruin in a very particular way, in which, like, the residents of the city, who at one point, like, had magical powers and stuff, now are, like, basically actively, like, decaying, like, undead people. And moreover, it is like an illness that will like stricken people who are like in this land, even if they aren't living in the capital city. So like people will wake up one day and all of a sudden they realize that they're like kind of like actively decaying. And like it's a weird kind of immortality in which like you never die, but you just become increasingly like horrifically, mutated. Like the basic conceit is like all the pain or injuries you ever sustain will never heal. And so you'll just continue to like live on as this creature who's increasingly in pain, but will never, have the relief of being healed or the relief of dying. And so like we're dealing with this kind of medieval kingdom. We don't know why the kingdom or the capital city of Elantris has become this way. And the story opens with, the prince. Is it the prince? I can't remember. Yeah. Prince Raoden. He wakes up one morning. He's about to get married to the princess of another kingdom. So like a kind of diplomatic marriage, but he seems to be pretty into this girl. He wakes up and it turns out he has become stricken with the illness. And so like when that happens, you have to go and live in the capital city, which is just this like squalor where everything is rotted and like people are just like living in suffering. And so he is one of our protagonists as we see kind of like what things are like in the city. Another protagonist is the woman he was about to marry, who is traveling to him from her foreign kingdom and arrives to news that her prospective husband has quote unquote died. They don't actually, it would be a like embarrassment to admit that he has been stricken with this disease, and so they like kind of like create this false idea that he's died, and so then she is kind of left as like a ruling monarch of this land that she never understood to begin with, because she only has just arrived. And then the third protagonist is like this like a priest of the religion or one of the religions of the region, who has like kind of like evangelistic aims to convert everyone in the region to his faith, while also kind of like trying to be strategic about it. And so he's kind of sort of the antagonist of the book, because his religion is kind of in opposition to the more like, it's a bit more like harsh and extreme version of the faith, as in opposition to the kind of more compassionate and liberal faith that the other characters have. At any rate, I mostly enjoyed this book. I don't think Brandon Sanderson is exactly my thing. One thing people talk about a lot with Brandon Sanderson is like, oh wow, he's so thoughtful with all these magical systems, and he's like thought through everything with his world building. And like I will say that that's true. Like it's a very like meticulously constructed little like bauble of like a land that he's created, and it has like very consistent magical rules that are very cleverly deployed in the story, and that's all nice. I thought it was just okay in terms of the characters, though. I didn't love the characters. They all kind of have this affect of like they're in a medieval-ish setting, but they all kind of like talk like modern people, and I don't know. I just don't really like that. I like in a fantasy book to be feeling like I'm transported into another world rather than like transported into someone's D&D campaign, which is kind of what this felt like, you know. So like it's people who sound like that they're from like, I think this was written in the 2000s. They sound like they're from the 2000s in the United States, but they are somehow in Elantris. Also, his prose style is just fine, which I think is like true of a lot of fantasy authors. To be honest, like you have a few fantasy authors like Tolkien comes to mind who are like kind of poetic and really thoughtful with their prose, but like Brandon Sanderson is very utilitarian with his prose. So like I didn't love the prose, didn't love how the characters presented themselves. I did think like some of the stuff was really interesting. I was engaged in the central mysteries and stuff. But it was just okay. I probably will not read a thousands and thousands of page series like the Stormlight Archives.
I think it's really sweet that you did that, though, that you read that because your student wanted you to.
Well, I was also curious. You know, Brandon Sanderson is a fairly big name in fantasy. And it was good to like say that I've read one of his books. And I didn't hate it, you know. It just, I think one was enough. And I'm glad this one was standalone. Another book that I read, speaking of fantasy books, is the final book in Philip Pullman's The Book of Dust trilogy, which I talked about last time when I read The Secret Commonwealth. And so The Book of Dust is a trilogy that is running kind of like parallel to his Dark Materials, which was like The Golden Compass and Subtle Night and The Amber Spyglass. And so this is Philip Pullman's kind of like companion trilogy to that trilogy. And last time I talked about how I thought The Secret Commonwealth was good. It was like an adventure story. The Rosefield is the conclusion of this, and I gotta say, is a huge disappointment. Not a good book.
Oh.
And it's one of these feelings that you get if you've ever like read along or watched along with something that kind of they keep delaying answers to things, and you're like, well, that's okay. I'll learn about that later. Mm-hmm. And then I started getting to like, oh wait, there's only 100 pages left in this, and they've not really answered everything. Oh wow, they're gonna wrap this up in 15 or in 50 pages. They're gonna wrap this up in 20 pages. There's one chapter left. They're gonna wrap this up, and like I just felt like it was so messy. Like the pacing was horrible. Like you spend long periods of time with things that have no real bearing on like the ongoing plots. For instance, like there's this like civilization of griffins who exist who are like, I guess cool, but like we spend a lot of time with them. They have to defeat a sorcerer who has cursed one of their griffins, and like that's cool, that's fine, except that this is the last book in a trilogy that is supposed to be answering mysteries that they've kept deferring. And when you get the answers to these mysteries, they don't make sense, and they're very clumsily done. I think Philip Pullman, as I've read him, you know, over the years, is a very good and thoughtful writer, and the prose on a sentence by sentence basis is really good. But the plotting of this was disastrous, I thought, and in ways that seem to like contradict the like parallel trilogy. So like one of the big things at the end of his Dark Materials is it's like a multiverse where they've been jumping in between universes. They have this device, this knife that allows them to cut holes in the universe and jump into another universe. And at the end of that trilogy, they find out that, oh, actually, this is environmentally devastating to do this to the world, to cut holes in the world to other books or to other universes, so you have to close them all up. And this is really distressing for the characters because like different characters are on different sides of these universes, and so they have to basically seal themselves off from each other. And in like in this book, at one point, they just find out that was a lie and that wasn't true, which like may have been interesting, but they don't do anything with it. They're just like, oh yeah, I guess you can open up holes to other universes now. And in fact, a big part of the plot is that holes have started opening up to this other universe now that challenges the Magisterium's authority or whatever. And like that could be really cool, but nothing is done with it. You go to the other universe, which they don't do until it seems like we're about to have that happen at the end of the Secret Commonwealth. But like it's like until like 500 pages into this book, they finally go into the other universe through this hole in the world. And you find out that the big bad thing that's happened in the other universe is like industry has destroyed these roses that they've been using to do these like science experiments in the other world. And there's this whole big thing about like how like, wow, like capitalism is the enemy or whatever. And like anyone who's listened to this podcast knows that like I will jump at the chance to criticize capitalism. So please believe me when I say that it is unsatisfying that in the last like 20 pages of this novel, they like hand wave away all the mysteries and be like, oh yeah, it was all capitalism was the problem. Like that is so unsatisfying in the context of this book. I want that to be the answer, but I want it to be the answer in a way that's satisfying. And it was not satisfying.
Was this your first experience with not liking one of his books?
Yeah, I've liked all of them. I mean, like, I've had issues, like, at various times over, but this was the first one where it was, like... And it was one of those books where, as I was going, I didn't realize I didn't like it until the end. When I got to the end, I'm like, that's it? I've been strung along all this time? Like, what it seems to me is that he really only had 2 books to write. He had... the first book, which I think, like, retrospectively, I would say is the best, the La Belle Sauvage, of this new trilogy.
Okay.
Which takes place before his Dark Materials, and then he had another book that was taking place after his Dark Materials. And I guess just for aesthetic reasons, or maybe because his publisher pushed him, I don't know what, but he made it a trilogy and split the stuff after his Dark Materials into 2 books. And, like, there's simply not the material there. He doesn't have the ideas. He does all this filler stuff.
His absent materials.
I agree. I have heard him say that his publisher made him change the ending of this book.
Oh.
I don't think whatever ending he originally had in mind would have fixed it. Because, like, as I'm reflecting over this book, there's just too much, like, that's sloppily done. Anyway, overall... I would not recommend this trilogy. I don't think it pays off the amount of time you have to spend with it.
I'm sorry. I feel like you were excited about this.
I was, and I enjoyed the first 2.
Yeah.
But then this one kind of revealed to me one of the reasons I enjoyed the Secret Commonwealth is I was enjoying it moment to moment and kind of expecting these deferred answers. Mm-hmm. And when the answers came, they were very deflating. And felt very unthoughtful, which is not something I would have said of his other books. Anyway, the last book I read, the 3rd book, very different. Completely different genre, different format even, different media. I read a collection of poetry by actually one of my friends. I've talked about poetry before on this podcast, and it's always poetry that my friends have written. Because I don't read that much poetry. But I do read it when my friends write it. And it turns out that I went through my entire education focusing on fiction writing. And none of my friends who did fiction writing have done anything.
Well,
that's not
true.
That's not strictly true, but few of them have.
Some of your grad school friends have.
2 of my grad school friends out of like a class of like 20 or whatever. But whatever, the people who have actually done the most were people who are not my creative writing peers, who were other people, including my friend Whitney Rio Ross, who just recently released her poetry collection, Thunder Makes Us, which is very good. It is a collection of poems, like I said, and I don't know. It's kind of hard to like summarize a collection because it doesn't like have an ongoing plot or anything like that, but
has a very
similar
pretty
to
cover.
her chapbook, which is called Birthmarks.
Which is so good.
Which is good, and several of the poems that are in Birthmarks appear in Thunder Makes Us. She has republished several of them, and they're good. But like kind of several running through lines are life in the South. You know, we live in the South. She lives in Nashville. We all went to school in Jackson, Tennessee. Living life in the South. There's a very good poem that is about her family history and how her mother wants to remember her family history, but she wants to not learn about her family history because she knows, being a white person in the South, there will be horrible,
it's not gonna be good.
Slavery, racist things in it. Also, a big component is her relationship with Christianity and the Bible. Birthmarks was like this as well, and several of the poems that are from Birthmarks are about this, where they kind of recontextualize biblical characters. Like there's a trio of poems about Esther, and each one kind of recasts Esther as a new thing. Like Esther as
in this
one
collection?
And also in Birthmarks.
Okay.
These poems are there in both. So like there's Esther as a wife, or Esther as a house or a homemaker, things like that. There's a erasure poem about Proverbs 31, and then also her relationship with her family. Her father and mother figure very prominently in this collection, as well as her sisters. And anyway, I just think she's a great writer, great poet, and I really highly recommend this book of poetry. It's very, very accessible. Also, I think sometimes poetry has this sheen of like academic, esoteric, and I do not think that is the case with Whitney's writing. It is very clear. It is very elegant, and I just think it's really good. You can just I think read it as almost like essayistic impressions through the lens of really, really pristine writing, and really wish Whitney all the best. And I'm really happy always when I see friends of mine publish things. So go get it. Thunder Makes Us.
All right.
That's all I've read.
Well, I think we're going to jump into our Newbery portion of the podcast. We are talking about Maniac Magee today.
Maniac Magee.
And the author of Maniac Magee is Jerry Spinelli. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Jerry was born in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is the inspiration for two mills in the book. He very much he made a fictional town, but a lot of the like geographical references that he makes are the same as in Norristown.
I will add, I looked into this. It's like barely fictional. Like he keeps street names the same. The zoo that's in this, like it has the same name in real life. Like it is very much just Norristown.
Yeah. So when Jerry was 16, speaking of poetry, he wrote a poem about a football victory, and I think he just wrote this for himself. Like he was a big football player. Like I think I from the Wikipedia article, it seemed like he had some aspirations to do this professionally. But anyway, he wrote this poem, and then his dad had it published in the newspaper without his knowledge. And
I'd be furious if my father had done that.
It seemed sweet.
It does seem sweet.
It's
it reminds me of
like,
that part in Anna Green
Gables. I was about to say that!
Where Diana sends her off and she has to like do the baking soda ad or whatever.
For Rollings Reliable, baking powder company.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you don't get that reference, I feel sad for you that you haven't engaged in this material. Regardless, let's get back to Jerry, okay? So around this time, he realized that he wasn't going to be a professional football player, and so he really wanted to focus on his writing. When he was
I wish more people made that decision.
I know.
How many football players have just gotten brain damage instead of writing the next great American novel?
I think your problem, though, Michael, is you didn't start with poetry, like.
Or I didn't start with being a football star. I think that was my problem.
You know, there's many things you could learn from Jerry.
I should have had some big football victories.
When he was in college at Gettysburg College, he wrote several short stories. He was also the editor of his school's literary magazine called The Mercury. And he worked, quote, normal jobs, like in department stores and those sort of things, because he wanted to save his mental energy for writing. So he would work in those jobs and then write in the evenings. He wrote several novels for adults, but he was not successful in publishing them. And his first novel that was published, Space Station 7th Grade, I think is what it was called, was published as a children's novel, but he actually intended that for adults. Like, that wasn't intended
That was
to
frustrating.
be.
We were just in a bookstore last night where we were looking at adult novels that were in the children's section.
Right.
Like Charles Dickens' Great
Well,
Expectations.
And I feel like on this podcast we were talking about another novel that was actually intended for adults, but was published as a children's novel. I can't remember who it was now. But anyway, that novel was published in 1982. He graduated from Gettysburg College in 1963 and got his master's from Johns Hopkins in 1964. And then in 1977, he married a lady named, I felt British there for a second. I said she was called instead of named.
Is that a British thing?
Yes. They say called. Anyway.
Well, they're wrong.
He married Eileen Massey. They met, this is so cute, okay? They met when working for a magazine company. She was in circulation and he was an editor.
Wow.
And
two households, both alike in dignity.
right. So they got married. And then Eileen also is an author. She wrote a ton of children's books. And she started doing so when their children were older and more independent.
Yeah, but did she win the Newbery Medal?
She wrote picture books. Which
Several
I guess
picture books have won the Newbery Medal.
I would not say several. I would say a handful.
We can talk later about the difference between a handful and several.
Regardless, they seem to be happy. They do have 6 children and 21 grandchildren. And he lives today in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and he's 85. So
21
Jerry's
grandchildren from 6 children. All of these people are having lots of kids.
Jerry's doing great. I do, it didn't say anything about his personal life or hers necessarily outside of their relationship, but she's published a lot of books for, like Zonder Kids, which is like the the Zondervan
like a
Bibles.
Publisher.
Yeah, she has several like religious books. So Christian books. So I don't know about their like religious affiliation, but they kind of like anyway. That's what I learned about Jerry. Tell us about the plot of this book.
Okay. So, Maniac Magee is about a boy whose name is not really Maniac. And, in fact, many of the characters in this book go by kind of like these, like, folktale, like, street names or whatever. Like, there's a kid named Mars Bars later on. And they all have, like, Christian names, like, government names.
Hands Down is, like, the football guy, right? You remember him?
Yeah, and he's also called Giant. Or is that the baseball player? The baseball player is called Giant. Anyway, so the character names are a little bit strange in this book because, like, the kind of conceit of this book is it's like a recounted, almost like folktale that's like among the kids in this town, 2 Mills, who talk. They tell the tale of Maniac Magee, and so this book is kind of recounting, like, who is Maniac Magee. And it like opens with this like highly like affected like almost like a like the when kids would do like the hand clapping games or skipping like jumping rope or whatever, and they would have a little chants. It's almost like that sort of thing where Maniac Magee is this folkloric figure, but we find out he's a real guy who is named Jeffrey, which I think
Jeffrey Lionel
Magee, who lives in 2 Mills, Pennsylvania, which is basically Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is basically in Philadelphia, but not quite. It's close enough to Philadelphia that there is its trolley system and also metro system is connected to Norristown. As I was looking at the Google Maps, you can take there's a little M. It's a good town when you're looking on Google Maps and there's a little M with the square around it. You're like, oh yeah.
So my little sister just moved to Philly, so we can go to Norristown.
We also visited Philadelphia last year.
When we go see her, maybe
we didn't actually go to Norristown though. I was thinking, like, reading this book, I was like, I wonder if we went to any of these places. But looking at the map, I don't think we did. At any rate, it's important that it's connected to the Philadelphia transit system because when Jeffrey is 3, his parents are on a trolley that crashes and they die, both his parents. And so he's orphaned. And then he has to go live with his aunt and uncle who are like who seem to actively hate each other, and they're like going through like a separation as he's living with them, but they're not willing to get divorced. And so they're basically like, the house is just miserable to live in. He says there's like 2 of everything because they refuse to share anything with anyone. And he lives with them 8 years, so until he's 11. And then when he's 11, he runs away after being in like a school play. Basically, he runs away from a school event, and he's not actually in 2 Mills at this point. He's in a place called Bridgeport or Bridgetown or something on the other side of the Schuylkill River. He runs across the bridge over the Schuylkill River, and he goes to 2 Mills, which is a racially segregated town in which along a street, which I think is, oh gosh, what is the street? Hector Street. Kind of divides this town into east and west. West 2 Mills, West End, they call it, is where all the white people live. East End is where all the black people live. And he runs through West End doing all sorts of things that kind of give him notoriety, such as like he strikes out this guy named McNabb, who's doing like Little League. John McNabb is like this older kid who's doing Little League. He meets this girl named Amanda Beale, and he like borrows her one encyclopedia entry that she, or not entry, but one encyclopedia volume she has. She has the letter A. And he like runs through all these people who will eventually like recur back in the novel, but he's basically just running. He doesn't know what he wants to do. He just wants to escape his aunt and uncle and their miserable house. And so the rest of the book is him pinging around 2 Mills in kind of this episodic adventure where he's like jumping from like kind of home to home, trying to figure out what he's going to do with life, while also kind of like transgressing the social boundaries between West End and East End, and white and black, and then like some of the class divides as well. And so some of the places he stays with Amanda's family, the Beals, who are a black family. Amanda's one of the kids, and they have some other kids too that he kind of becomes like a surrogate, like older brother to. And that is his definitely like one of the more nurturing homes that he lives in. It's kind of a more conventional home. You know, there's adults who take care of the kids and, you know, all this sort of stuff. He also at one point goes and lives in the zoo, which is a real zoo. What his name is? Zoo. It actually exists in Norristown. But he in the zoo, he also runs across this retired minor league pitcher whose name is Earl Grayson, who's this old man who eventually like starts to take care of Maniac Magee, Jeffrey Magee, but Maniac is what his street name has become, because he does all sorts of crazy things. And he also lives with this family of what seems to be white supremacists, because they're like always practicing for a race war, named the McNabbs. And there's a lot of things that happen with each of these characters, and they're a little bit hard to summarize because it's a lot of like, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's very much like a picaresque novel, or like just an episodic novel, like I said. But like the most important thing is Maniac Magee's seeming ability to find camaraderie and like kind of found families on both sides of 2 Mills. And so like he is able to in some ways like broker relationships across these segregation lines in ways that hadn't seemingly been possible before. And so like as he, you know, lives with the Beals, he is introducing like the East End people to like, oh, look, it's a white kid, and like, look, this white kid is now among us. When he's with with Grayson and the McNabbs, he is kind of like almost like a diplomat, like saying like, hey, look, these black people on the other side of Hector Street are okay, you know. Like there's this one sequence where him and Grayson are talking with one another, and Grayson's like, oh, you lived over in the West or the East End, you know, and they have this whole conversation. He's like, do they eat meatloaf over there? He's like, yeah, they eat meatloaf and like corn too and peas. And he's like, yeah. so there's this kind of like
they sleep in beds.
They sleep in beds. And so like Maniac Magee is this figure who, because of his being unmoored socially, is able to transgress these boundaries that haven't been transgressed before. And it eventually gets to a point where this kind of comes to a head. Like, the people he stays with last are the McNabs, who, like I said, the kids seem to be like, they like play act race wars. It's very disturbing. They also have this abusive father who's like barely present, but comes in and like messes them up every once in a while. And the book kind of comes to a head when one of the black characters from the East End that Maniac knows, whose name is Mars Bar, comes over and meets like the McNabs. So he's black, and he's meeting these white supremacist kids. And first of all, Maniac invites him to a party at the McNabs, wherein the kids start playing this. It's almost like a Cowboys and Indians sort of thing, but they do it like the East Enders versus the West Enders. And like, it's very clear to Mars Bars, like, oh, these kids are like playing about like killing black people. And he becomes very upset about that. But then later, he saves one of these kids from being run over by a train. And that kind of like creates this kind of like understanding among them that isn't like 100% resolved in the book. But like, that's like the kind of climactic incident. And like, Maniac Magee is able to go back to Amanda Beale's house and kind of find a permanent home among the Beales by the end of the book. So there is a sense of, this is the beginnings of racial reconciliation in Two Mills. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that happens that I've not encountered, including more of like the kind of folkloric sort of stuff. Like at one point, he like unties a knot that apparently has not been untied for like a decade, and gets free pizza for a year, and like there's other stuff like that that's like
but he's allergic to pizza.
He's allergic to pizza, so he gives it to the McNab kids, and that's how he kind of gets it in with them. They want to run away to Mexico, so he kind of feeds them fake information about Mexico so that they don't run away but go to school instead. Like, there's like a lot of other stuff that like goes on, and it's a little hard to just like summarize it all, because there's just like, each chapter is a little bit of its own thing. But that, yeah. I don't know, would you add anything to the overall arc of the book?
No, I think you did a great job, and I think some of it, if we left anything out, we'll probably get into it as we talk about specifics. So, yeah. Something else we should have said is Michael and I have both read this book before, so this was a reread for us.
Ago. I was maybe 10 or 11 when I read this.
I read it in 6th grade, so it was a long time ago. And both of us were struck by how much of this book we did not remember. Like,
yeah, I didn't remember most of it,
even
honestly.
remember.
I remember the knot.
I didn't even remember that race was like a major theme.
Neither did I.
In the book. And so I don't know what we were doing or what we took away from it. But
I mean, I think we were 10 or 11
I
where
know.
These things didn't have the significance to us that they do now.
Well, and that kind of leads me to what I liked about this book, and part of it is the tone. And I think that the tone really like drives what you remember about the themes, because and I think that there are some like problematic things about the tone and how they deal with race, but I've found it to be really enjoyable for the most part, that you can read about a story that has really like dark themes in it, you know, like child abuse, like child neglect, like child homelessness, racism, like you name it, and it still feels like a lighthearted story, and I think it really works for the book. Yeah. I think it really works for it. The story is always driving forward. You're never bored. You're always eager to see what's happening next. This is a very episodic book, but it's not one of those where like the episodes stand alone. They very much add on to each other, and I found that enjoyable. I don't love folklore where it's like, here, let me tell you a story, and then I'm going to tell you another story, and it's not really connected to the one that I just told you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I get very bored with those kind of books. This is why I don't love mythology. I loved this. I think it was very enjoyable, the way that the like episodes are meaningful in their own right, and then they also like build on each other. I think that's really well done. I love Amanda Beale
with her volume A of the encyclopedia.
I love her. I think she's magnificent. I think she's fierce. I love the scene where she's pulling Maniac out of the buffalo pen. And
at the very end?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
nice.
love her so much. I love her throughout, but you don't...
I can't believe she loans him the book, though. Like, this is a prized possession, and she meets this kid for like 3 minutes, and she loans her the book.
I think she's a great judge of character.
She is. Unfortunately, some other people tear that book apart.
That's true, but it wasn't Jeffrey, and she knew that it wouldn't be him. I love her tenacity and how she carries her books around in a suitcase because they're her prized possession. I just thought she was really vibrant, and I loved her. I understood why we didn't, but I wished we could have had more time with her in the book. Yeah, I think some of this feels like complicated to me because I do really like that Jerry Spinelli is able to take like these very terrifying phenomena of child homelessness and all the things that I just said and make it an adventure. I think it can be problematic at times, but I do think that it works. I also appreciate that in a book that has like really dark themes like this, there are many trusted adults throughout.
And very few non-trusted adults. There's really only a couple of adults who are like genuinely like dangerous.
Right. And I think this is just what I would prefer to read in a book. I think it's one of the reasons why I have a hard time with Roald Dahl is there are like no trusted adults and they're like all abusive or they're really zany and weird. I like that in the midst of like the scary, there are like, and a lot of the unknown, there are trusted adults throughout. And I think one of my favorite parts of the book is Jeffrey's relationship with Grayson. I think it's one of the stronger parts of the book, and I was very, very upset and taken aback when Grayson died.
I forgot that I didn't forget that, but I forgot to mention it during my thing. Is the reason he leaves Grayson, who he seems like to have built a real like father-son relationship with, is that he dies basically the day after Christmas, I think, one time, and that's very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. The book is divided into 3 parts. I should have maybe mentioned this as far as the structure. Part 1 is raised with the Beals in the East End. And then at the end of that, he basically is the victim of... Not the victim, but he's the target of several hate crimes.
Well, and he's most concerned about the impact that it's having on the family.
Correct. Because he's the lone white kid. Like, he starts to be the victim of, like... I don't know, we can get into this later, but I guess what we would call like reverse racism, where some of the older black people are like, get out, white kid. Mm-hmm. They call him fish belly as like kind of a slur. And so then that's the end of part 1 is he decides to leave because he's realizing that it's like more harm than good for him to be here. Then part 2 ends when Grayson dies because he can't live with Grayson anymore because Grayson's dead. And that leads us to part 3, which is kind of the synthesis of like the 2 sides when he's with the McNabbs and Mars Bar comes over. Anyway, sorry. Maybe it's not important to have, like, re-explain that.
No, it's okay. Why don't you get into what you liked?
I liked a lot of the same stuff you did. What I remembered most about this book is it was about this kind of, like, mythical kid.
Yeah.
And, like, this kid's running around doing wild things. I remember the knot. He, like, unties this knot and gets free pizza. I remembered he's having, like, misadventures with these kind of older kids. Like, I remember Mars Bar being a character who's, like, in the book, he's like in the East End, kind of like the big kid in town, but he's kind of like a bully to Maniac, but eventually there's kind of a grudging respect of him. I remember the Grayson stuff, which I agree is one of the stronger, maybe the strongest like part of the book. It's also the part of the book that's the least like mythic, you know?
He's they're in their own little world.
Yeah, and you get a kind of mythology around like Grayson's past because he is a minor league player and like he basically never had a shot at the majors, but he has like these experiences that he had. And one of his experiences is that he struck out Willie Mays. And another experience is that like his is like kind of traveling around from town to town. So in a lot of ways, he's like Maniac in the sense that he's transient. He doesn't have a kind of like real family to speak of in a traditional sense. And so there's like a kind of like camaraderie that's like built in because they kind of share a mutual like loneliness that I think they fulfill in each other. That's really nice. And very moving, but it is like the most naturalistic part of the book, I think, because you are mostly like dealing with this kind of kindly old man who is not educated, because like that's another point that they make, is that like this guy was kind of railroaded into like he was viewed as having a disability as a child, and so was never really taught how to do things because he was always, I think they talk about like he was put in classes where all they did was cut things with scissors and like things like that. And he overheard teachers saying he'll never learn to read and things like that. And so like he's a person who is kind of like shunted into one path in life, you know. And Maniac, because of some of his background, doesn't quite have those barriers that Grayson has, but he has the kind of shared sense of placelessness with Grayson. And so they make a kind of bond with each other, which I think is very sweet. Like Maniac teaches Grayson how to read, for instance, and then Grayson kind of like...
Grayson teaches Jeffrey how to pitch.
Yeah, you keep calling him Jeffrey. I should call him that too, because Maniac is kind of like the... I don't think that's what Jeffrey would call himself.
Yeah. But yeah, like Grayson was this famous baseball player, so he teaches him...
He wasn't famous. He was like pointed... Like he never made it.
In the minor leagues. I mean...
That's like not making, like he's like barely scraping by.
He was a really great baseball player. And so he teaches Jeffrey how to pitch. And that comes into play when he's like playing McNabb in baseball later on.
Right. Well, earlier on, like one of the things that he does as he's running through, like, because when he runs away from his aunt and uncle, he goes through all and meets all the people he'll meet later on. One of the things he does is he strikes out. He like runs into this little league game and like strikes out McNabb, who's like the best player.
I thought it was that he couldn't be struck out by McNabb.
Maybe it's one of those two. He bests McNabb in baseball.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
And that's at the very beginning, and then it wraps around to like the third part of the book.
He is able to teach McNabb that famous pitch.
Yeah.
Anyway. Go ahead.
But so I really like the Grayson sections too, and it's a weird like contradiction in the book. That like I think the best section is the most down to earth section, which is with Grayson. But the best thing about the book overall is this kind of like almost like poetry that like Jerry Spinelli does regarding like the kind of larger than life image of Maniac Magee, and how like the book will slip into these like kind of almost fantastical sequences that are filtered through like kids' memory of what happened rather than what actually happened and stuff. And I really was transported by those sections, but the part I was most engaged with was his connection with Grayson. And I like you, like I really like the sections with the Beals as well. It's very sweet. Amanda is a great character, although she's not really in the book that much. No, unfortunately, she's not. It's, you know, the main character is Jeffrey the whole time, and anything that Jeffrey doesn't experience, we don't experience. And like because of the way the book is structured, you'll get these kind of like almost like montage sequences of like, here's how life became for Jeffrey as he was with these people. And when he's with the Beals, it's like that too. And so, but I'm not really saying anything different than you, but I thought those were all like really good parts of the book. What'd you not like?
Well, it's hard to like verbalize, and I think that we're gonna kind of land on the same places in this book. But I really appreciate what this book is trying to do with race, especially for its intended audience of like middle grade. But it just has not aged well. I think it was probably like when it was published, I just don't think it would have had the same kind of like problematic things as it does today. And what I mean by that is the idea of a like white kid being able to bring the blacks and the whites together, and it's very much there's like ignorance on both sides is kind of the tone, when it is like very problematic that there is a very violent white supremacist family that Jeffrey brings a black child into and kind
which
of
the black kid like pushes back on, like, to the book's credit.
Yes, but I don't feel that Jeffrey's ever called to like repair with that, or
He's
like
not. He's not.
it's really kind of set up in a way that like Mars Bar is like so arrogant that like Jeffrey's trying to humble him in a way, and I just to me that was just really, really damaging, and I don't think that like the book really has any big major problems with it.
And the fact that, like, in order for that situation to be resolved, it's Mars Bar who has to save the white kid, who had just who is like bathed in an ideology that lets him like pretend to kill black kids all the time. Like, it's just a weird look.
I mean, I do think that it is really realistic for like the outcome of that being the white kids being like, hey, when you come play at our house, you can play. They like have built this like fortress to try to they think that the like black people are going to rebel and then come and storm their house, so they've built this like fort out of concrete blocks, and by they I mean the adults, to try to protect themselves if the blacks come and rebel. And so the kids play in this fort, and they play like, who's going to be the blacks and who's going to be the whites. And so when they have like this, when the little, after Mars Bar saves the brother, they're like, hey, when you come and play at our house, we'll let you be the white person. And so I think that is like Spinelli's way of saying like, it takes a long time for this like racism to be unlearned and for you to truly have repair. But I don't love that the burden is put on Mars Bar to like begin that like reconciliation work. I also sorry, where else am I? I think that where the race dynamics play out the best and the least problematic is in his conversations with Grayson about living with the Beals.
Well, because like, Grayson is just like genuinely ignorant. Like, he's not a hateful person.
Right. And Jeffrey's not trying to save anyone. He's just talking about his experience to another white man that has been taught differently. And I think that that's where we really see like the most like meaningful change where that can happen. And I feel like the scene at the end where Jeffrey and Mars Bar start running together, like, so Mars Bar has gone into this very racist home and is very taken aback, understandably, kind of leaves. He and Jeffrey don't really talk about it again until they just start, like, running together in the mornings. And somehow we're supposed to see this as, like, their redemption together in their relationship. And this is all before Mars Bar saves the kid, but that's where it really starts to happen. And I just would have liked to have seen some actual repair here, because I just don't think those scenes make much sense. And maybe it's trying to be within the folklore of everything, but this is just one part that I felt kind of fell flat. Yeah, but that's... What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of the same thoughts. And, like, a lot of this is tough because there is a plausible deniability about any of this, right? So, like, one of the things I don't love is how there's a sort of equivalency that's made between, like, wow, Maniac is not accepted by all the black people on the East End, and Mars Bars is not accepted by all the white people on the West End. And, like, so on the one hand, you can say, I'm sure, you know, you can find examples, I mean, I know examples of, you know, black communities being unduly skeptical of, like, you know, white people. It's also a
matter of safety for them.
Well, correct. And you could also say, like, well, the book shows that because it shows the white family is, like, kind of, like, trying to instigate a race war.
Right.
And so, like, that's there. Like, that's there. But I guess, like, the structure of the book implies an equivalency.
Yes.
Even though,
yes,
like, the content of the book kind of shows the material realities as not being identical. And I guess, like, there's a part of me that just bristles at that. And I think, like, part of it also is that the book does this weird thing. It doesn't come out and say this outright, but it almost positions Maniac or Jeffrey as this magical kid who has been like blessed with race blindness.
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
There's a passage in the book where it talks about like Maniac could see the differences in people, like how so and so is better at football or so and so is better, but he didn't understand the difference between East and West and white and black until this one thing happened, and the one thing was like him being like targeted by like a prejudiced like black man against like white people, and like I don't know, maybe I don't believe that. He's 11 years old, has lived in this. He's not lived in 2 Mills, but he's lived in the Philadelphia area.
America.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, does he genuinely not understand that racism exists? Like, and I don't know. Like, I think about my own experiences with this, and like, I moved to Tennessee when I was 12, and like, that was definitely like a different thing. Like, moving to Tennessee, which I had been living in Texas, which is not like a place free of racism, but like, it is not a place where the racial divides are exactly the same as Tennessee, and so like, going to Tennessee did kind of open my eyes to things that I hadn't experienced before. In particular, this like really deeply entrenched, like kind of deep South, like, you know, racial apartheid sort of thing, which existed to a degree in Texas, but not like in Tennessee. And so like, I guess I do get like you go into a new place and you don't quite understand like how there's different dynamics than where you go. But we're talking about crossing a river. Like, we're talking about like one side of the Schuylkill to the other. We're not talking about like 3 states away, like, which is, or 2 states away, like where I moved, you know, 16-hour drive. And I don't know, maybe things were just different back in like, because I think Jerry Spinelli is like also recalling his childhood. Like, I think I saw something like where he talked about that. And so like maybe this is meant to be in like the 1950s or, you know, whenever he was growing up, or 1960s, in which like differences of region were a lot smaller than they are now because people weren't quite as mobile as they are now. Like, I get that, but like there's just a part of me that doesn't really believe that there's this mythical 11-year-old white kid who somehow has never heard or been exposed to racism before and therefore can be this magical you know, avatar of like
Uniting
post-racial society.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, and maybe that's overly cynical of me, I'm not sure, but like I have a hard time kind of buying that as a premise. And so some of the things where the book does that, I kind of am like, I don't know. At the same time, like I said, there's a plausible deniability to it. Like 11 is still young. Like, you don't understand the world when you're 11. You don't always understand it, like the broader structures of what you've been exposed to for 11 years. So like maybe this is a book about Maniac Magee's growing awareness of racial divides, which I would say I also learned about at around the same time as a child. So like, I don't know, like maybe I'm being unduly cynical, but I guess like when I think about a book like this, I think about the adult writing it rather than the child protagonist. And like part of me feels like Jerry Spinelli is a little bit Pollyanna about like race in America.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of like kind of an old school, like a person who like Martin Luther King, but only listened to the part of I Have a Dream speech where he's like, I have a dream that my children will be judged by the content of their character other than besides the color of the skin or whatever. And like, that's a lovely sort of idea, is that like, what if we could all just imagine? But like, it doesn't really, that ideal doesn't address the material realities of America, in which race is baked into a lot more things than just how do you perceive each other's color. And like the book addresses that. And so I don't exactly know what exactly would I want differently here. I'm not exactly sure, but like, I don't love how it goes about it because it does feel like not as thoughtful as I would want it to be about these things. At the same time, this is 1990 when this book was published. In 1990, people in America, like interracial marriage was not a popular position in 1990, you know,
Right.
based on Pew studies, you know, so like, I don't know. I don't want to be this person who like, you know, looks back 36 years ago and says, wow, people back then sure were dumb. I'm so much better than them now. And so like maybe this was like a meaningful thing to say in the 90s, in the early 90s, to say like, wow, let's imagine a kid who was free from racial prejudice. What could that do to society? But part of me now reads that and I kind of roll my eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of waffle back and forth on how I feel about this.
Yeah. I still give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, I overall liked it. And I think, like, if nothing else, like, the individual sequences that are really good. Yeah. And, like, Jerry Spinelli has a really good control of prose and tone, like you said.
Yes.
And so it is, like, always, like, really engaging to read. And it is unique. Like, I think there have been many of these books that I've complained about as, like, the prose style was just kind of pedestrian, like, whatever. But, like, this is a book where, like, is very vibrant.
Yeah.
Like, there's a real, like, care into trying to capture, like, not just, like, what Jeffrey's experiencing, but, like, what does it mean to this kind of, like, Greek chorus of a community, what Jeffrey is experiencing. And that is a really interesting way that the book is framed. And I think whatever misgivings I might have with some of it, it's very cool and interesting how it's written. And I like that. And thumbs up for me, too.
So we have picked the book we're going to do next, and that is Crisscross by Lynn Ray Perkins, which was published in 2006.
2005. It won the medal in 2006.
Neither of us have read it before.
Nope.
So we will let you know what we think.
Yeah.
You let us know what you think.
Please do at newberrychronicles@gmail.com. I'm sure people have thoughts, or if you don't have thoughts, I'm sure people would like to just talk with us because we're such charming people.
I'm sure they would.
Yes. At any rate, we will hopefully, before too long, read Crisscross and way back in. So, you have anything else, Rebecca?
Nope. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you.